Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. I hope your week is going very, very well. Thank you again so much for those of you who continue to contact me and express your appreciation for this series on 1 Corinthians 15, how enlightening it is, how enriching it is for your life, how it glorifies God, and how He keeps His word. You know, I commented with William Bell on our Two Guys in a Bible Fulfilled radio program just recently that it's so important, for people to realize that the message of covenant eschatology is all about the glory of God. It is about the glory of Jesus Christ. It is the vindication of Jesus Christ and His Word. Paul said in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 that the coming of Christ, that was coming in the first century, He was coming to be glorified in His saints. So when we preach and we teach covenant eschatology, we are preaching the glory of Christ, that He came and He was revealed as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. This is wonderful news. This is great news. This is fantastic news. And it's all about Jesus Christ and His faithfulness. Well, anyway, we are looking at Hosea, the source of Paul's resurrection doctrine, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And there is a theme carried through Hosea that is extremely powerful. And that is the theme of harvest. You see, the 10 northern tribes had sown the wind, they would reap the whirlwind. Hosea chapter 8. That was her harvest. That harvest was the destruction of her physical nationalistic kingdom. Hosea chapter 1, 5 and following, or 3 and following, the Lord says, I will cause to cease the kingdom of Jezreel. In the parallel book of Amos, the Lord says, I will cause to end the kingdom of Israel, but not the family. So Israel's harvest, as a result of her sin, was national judgment. It was death, covenantal death. Well, keep in mind that Yahweh could not divorce Judah because Messiah had not yet come. And yet, even throughout the book of Hosea, we find how guilty Jerusalem was. Did that mean that the Lord would excuse her sin? No. It meant that He just could not bring that divorce at that time. He could not put her to death at that time. But notice what He said in Hosea chapter 6. As bands of robbers lie in wait for a man, so the company of priests murder on the way to Shechem. Surely they commit lewdness. I have seen a horrible thing in the house of Israel. There is the harlotry of Ephraim. Also, O Judah, a harvest is appointed for you when I return the captives of my people. In other words, in the day of the salvation of the remnant, Judah would receive her harvest. Well, guess what? One of Paul's very favorite doctrines was that the salvation of the remnant, i.e., the remnant of Israel, was being saved in the first century, even through his ministry. Romans chapter 9, and guess what he does? He quotes from Hosea to justify that ministry. Where it was said, you are not my people, there it shall be said, you are the people of the living God. Hosea is very much in Paul's mind. But wait, what would happen in the days of the salvation of the remnant? Judah would receive her harvest. What was the harvest? National judgment. But you see, at the same time, that's the bad news. Okay? That's the bad news. there is likewise a positive harvest, and that is the resurrection of Hosea chapter 5 and 6, of Hosea 13, in which the Lord said He would put an end to the death that came through the sin of Israel. He would restore them to His sight. And by the way, that would mean salvation for the nations. So here in Hosea, we have the prediction both of a negative harvest and a positive harvest. Remember, Paul quotes Hosea chapter 6 in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-3. He quotes Hosea in Hosea 13, verse 14, in 1 Corinthians 15, in anticipating the resurrection. Okay? Guess what? Christ was the first fruit of the resurrection of the dead promised in Hosea. And by the way, He was put to death. He offered His life. But He was the very first to be raised from the death experienced by Adam and by Ephraim. What death was that? Well, it's very clear. Jesus was not the first person to be raised from biological death. Just as Adam and Eve died spiritually, i.e., the loss of fellowship, just like Israel was put to death, i.e., loss of fellowship. When Ephraim sinned, he died, yet he sins more and more. That's not biological death. Jesus was the first to be raised from Adam's death. He was the first of Israel to be raised from sin, death. So just like Hosea said, that in the last days, Hosea chapter 3, verse 5, Israel would be restored, and David, their king, would rule over them. And I don't have time to develop this, but you see the promise that David would rule over them is a resurrection promise. Now, it's not the promise that David, literal David, would be raised from the dead. But his seed line that had fallen down, i.e. died, would be raised, i.e. resurrected, in Messiah. That's resurrection. That's the way the Hebrews thought. And so, in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul predicted resurrection at the end of the Old Covenant age. He predicted the harvest from a negative perspective, and thus in 1 Corinthians 15, the end of the Old Covenant. Just like Hosea predicted the harvest of Judah in the last days, when her harvest would be the same harvest as the 10 northern tribes. National judgment, destruction of the physical kingdom. We thus have in Hosea and in 1 Corinthians 15 a sharp two-edged sword. The prediction of the resurrection is posited at the time of the judgment of Judah. The prediction of the resurrection is a positive thing because forgiveness of sin, restoration to fellowship would take place at that time as well. What a beautiful, harmonious story. And don't forget, I cover this and a whole lot more in my 30-lesson series on Hosea and resurrection. You really need to get a copy of this. Total price is $24.95 postpaid. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the series on Hosea. You will be glad you did. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you on the flip side.